G'day, you legends. So last night we all watched UFC 310. Let's wrap this one up, put this away, and sort of define the talking points that are going to be our lives for this week. So there are a few massive takeaways from this card, and one of them is that I am seriously considering whether or not the UFC is actually rigged. No lie. We saw last night what was clearly one of the biggest robberies, worst decisions we've ever seen in all of MMA history, and just luckily for the UFC, it sets up the next storyline for the heavyweight division in a post-Jon Jones era. What am I talking about? I am talking about the robbery decision of Ciryl Gane over Alexander Volkov. Round one, it's close. Could have gone either way. I had it to Gane. A lot of people in my stream, a lot of people on Twitter had it to Volkov. It was one of those 50-50 rounds. Then round two happens. It's clearly Volkov. It's clearly Volkov. By any eye, by any reading of the rules, Volkov beat the piss out of Gane on the feet, clearly with impact. His impactful shots. His impactful shots that weighed more heavily than the cumulative damage shots. Why am I saying it that way? Because it is exactly written that way in the rules. Read the goddamn rules of the sport, you judges. Round three, Volkmanov comes out and out wrestles Gane pretty bloody clearly. The scorecards begin to get red. Ciryl Gane is already waltzing out of the cage, head down in defeat. Ciryl Gane's team is shaking the hands of Alexander Volkov's team. Everybody knows what is going on here. Then the scorecards get red, and Gane is given the victory. The look on Rogan's face says it all. Gane almost walks out of his own victory speech. And now, when Jon Jones leaves the UFC heavyweight division, you have a undisputed champion in Tom Aspinall, English, who is now on a winning streak, Ciryl Gane, French, for the undisputed world heavyweight title in MMA. I have been saying this for years. I've been saying this to my friends since before I started this channel that was trying to get them into MMA. If you are not from Europe, you might not understand just how much money that sentence makes. Tom Aspinall, English, versus Ciryl Gane, French, heavyweight MMA championship of the world. The amount of money that sentence generates for the UFC is insane. And in 8 months' time, when the UFC marketing machine has kicked into gear and it's DDP versus Shavkat, that pay-per-view has just wrapped up. We're all excited about it. And the next pay-per-view, the empty NPC vessels of the world, they won't even remember what happened at this pay-per-view because they'll be so caught up with what just happened in the last one. And that sentence, UFC champion, English champion Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane, heavyweight winning streak, that is all the UFC needs for their marketing machine to pump it out to the NPCs of the world. It's a massive fight. It makes millions of dollars for the UFC, and it all hinges on last night's decision. So apparently this entire UFC 310 breakdown is going to be about how much of that decision has broken me as a fan of the UFC. Seriously, I honestly thought what we were doing here was real. I'm an idiot. You know, I thought the best actually ended up fighting the best. I knew the UFC, they pick and choose the most fun, right? But I thought that eventually the best does fight the best. Eventually, with all the little playing of the games that the UFC does behind the scenes, we do eventually get to the right end. But I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore. I'm not saying the UFC is as scripted as the WWE, but man, they really do seem to have a lot of influence. They really do the UFC seem to be able to pick the right time for the right opponent, right? And then the right scorecard seems to get pulled every single time it needs to. It absolutely needs to. You got O'Malley over Petr Yan, Paddy Pimblett over Gordon, Gane over Volkov. There's so many more examples of this. And every single time, it's good for the UFC. Every time. Anyway, moving on. Let's move on from the worst robbery in history. Poor Volkov, man. Poor Volkov. People I've seen... No, you know what? Let's not move on. I got to move on. But Jesus, man. I've seen people saying that, Volkov will bounce back. What are we talking about, man? This is like... He needs to fight Tom Aspinall for the heavyweight title. Yeah, Tom Aspinall will probably beat him, but we're talking about for Alexander Volkov. It's like $2 million fight on the line that's just been snatched away from him against Tom Aspinall. Plus pay-per-view points if he actually wins. Plus his win bonus for this fight against. It's legacy. It's money. It's the legitimacy of our premier division, the heavyweight division. There's so much meaning that goes into this robbery. It's disgusting. It's a disgusting robbery. Truly is. And I really need to think about the UFC being a legitimate sport or not. MMA is a legitimate sport. I don't know if the UFC is a legitimate organization anymore. I truly don't. Move on, Doug. Move on. All right, Shavkat versus Gary. Have we ever seen, oh my God, there's a lot of like superlatives here, isn't there? But have we ever seen a more aura-losing, aura-socking fight than what Shavkat and Ian Gary was? Shavkat has lost all of his height. He fought so Mario Batista-esquely. He fought with less knees to the thigh than even Merab Dvalishvili could fight with. The aura has been sucked out of the room when Shavkat walks into it. I'm sick of seeing images of this guy sitting on his throne of furs like an absolute world beater. It's almost like he had a lot of success early on, well down the rankings when the competition wasn't that high. But what we learned in the Wonder Boy fight is, decent takedown defense, and Shavkat's going to struggle with you, right? If Shavkat is just going to push you up against the cage until he can get you down, and if you have a level of takedown defense like Wonder Boy or Gary or maybe even JDM, you're not going to be that much of a threat, Shavkat. And Belal Muhammad is not going to be threatened by your game, Shavkat. I don't think Shavkat beats Belal. I really don't. I think Bilal's forward pressure, and even though Belal hasn't got, cement in his hands like Tom Aspinall, his pressure is going to be enough to handle Shavkat's I'm going to lean on you until you give up sort of game plan. And not only did Shavkat lose aura, but I've now got to give Ian Gary credit because of how well he dealt with Shavkat's pressure, how good he looked in the scrambles, how well he took Shavkat's back, how he nearly finished him with the submission, like how good he looked on the feet with Shavkat. He was able to fend off the takedown. Shavkat won, but let's face it, Ian Gary was the better fighter in there. Yeah, Shavkat won, but Ian Gary did better. Shavkat was just a little bit heavier, pushed him against the cage a little bit more. I truly believe that if Ian Gary had eaten some red meat, he would have won that fight. This isn't like a joke or a knock on veganism. You choose what you want to choose, but for a professional athlete that needs their body to perform at a truly high level in a game of millimeters in a strength-based game, the vegan diet doesn't have the amino acid breakdown or the minerals required to generate the same amount of strength as a fully completed diet does. And I think it cost Ian Gary a shot at the title last night. I truly do. I obviously think Ian Gary is still young enough where he'll be able to grow into his frame a little bit more, and he definitely has time to bounce back. But if you're looking at how many dollars you want to make as quickly as possible before you accumulate as much brain damage as you do in the world of MMA, veganism was something that led Ian Gary to a loss here when he could have been fighting for a title next. Yeah, kind of crazy. We had the absolutely hilarious moment of Belal Muhammad trying to enter the cage and security not remembering that he is the champion. You can't write that. That is just a goated moment in MMA history. The security doesn't know that he's the champion to let him into the cage. But yeah, it's a great face-off. I'm going to be rooting for Belal Muhammad against Shavkat Rakhmonov. What happened last night? What's next? Let's cover this, right? Let's talk about this. Kron Gracie, cut him from the UFC. He should be going only to grappling tournaments. He is a horrible MMA fighter. This isn't the 90s. This isn't the early 2000s. Okay? Everyone knows basic jiu-jitsu. It's horrible. Also, there's no point listening to fighters in their pre-fight press conference. They just blab delusional garbage. Kron Gracie, in his pre-fight press conference, was talking about how he used jiu-jitsu in his last fight so much because he felt so much pressure from the jiu-jitsu community because of his last name, and how he had to show off Gracie jiu-jitsu, and he was going to come with a more well-rounded game plan in this fight. The fight starts, they touch gloves every single round. They touch gloves, and Kron Gracie wades towards Bryce Mitchell, not even pumping a jab, just walks towards him and pulls guard like it was the noughties and they were fighting in gis. Kron acts like Bryce is wearing a gi, and he can put his hands around Bryce's gi, jumps up on him and wraps his legs around his hips like a girl who's in heat, mate, and then pulls him down onto the mat. And Bryce Mitchell is just like, all right, I'll beat you up here for a bit. Until eventually he does and knocks his bloody brains into his skull. Cut, Gracie. Stop thinking that jiu-jitsu is the only tool that you need. Shooter Box have done the best job of integrating jiu-jitsu into modern MMA. But jiu-jitsu, just on its own, useless. Great in the street, you know? If you know jiu-jitsu and you want to come up to me in the pub, you'll probably beat my ass because I don't know a thing about jiu-jitsu. But in high-level MMA, it's over, boys. It's over. Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. Again, there's no joke here, right? Anthony needs therapy. He needs a lot of therapy to deal with his life. The end of his athletic career is happening to Anthony Smith, and that's very hard for a lot of men to deal with. We talked about this a little bit in the MMA community when Alexander Volkanovski was talking about how he was out of the game for a bit because he had to recover, and he had a little glimpse of his life of what happens post-fighting, right? We see examples of this across the sporting world where men have this goal in their lives for a long time, which is their career, and then when they get to the end of the career, they sort of don't know what to do with themselves. You line that up with the passing of Anthony Smith's friend and coach, and that's a lot of life-changing moments to happen to a man. That's a lot of emotion. And Anthony Smith, he doesn't know how to process that in a non-self-destructive manner, and he needs help to deal with it. And anyone telling him anything otherwise is doing him a disservice as a friend and as a colleague. Anthony Smith needs therapy. He shouldn't be allowed in an MMA cage again. It's not a joke. It's not funny. It's just what's happening. All right, that's the truth. Let's move on from the career that was Anthony Smith. Shut with this. There are a lot of good points, but unfortunately, I got to get to work. This is why you guys got to like the video so I can dedicate more time to these videos. Let's get to this run. Alexandre Pantoja, he needs to be in your top 5 pound-for-pound fighters of all time. He needs to be. That's going to be the argument of the streams this week. He can strike. He can grapple. He's now dominated across his division almost twice. He's lapped his division. And now with bringing in Asakura, Asakura had some great striking, sick striking, awesome scrambles, really did well fending off the submissions while he survived. It now shows that Alexandre Pantoja has not just dominated his division twice, but he's now almost dominating champions from other leagues. We could say he's dominated over other leagues as well. He is a top 5 in the world, pound for pound, skill for skill, resume for resume fighter. The question is, where, with how stacked and good the top 5 is right now, where do you put Alexandre Pantoja? He definitely deserves to be in there, 100%. And what is next for Alexandre Pantoja? I know that the mightiest of mouses, the GOAT of MMA, has already said that he's not interested, but it is time to open up the bank account. Why are we offering Jon Jones, the dog of MMA, the cheater of MMA, the loss to Dominic Reyes of MMA? Why are we offering him $7 million? We have a legit top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now, Alexandre Pantoja, with nothing to do but suck on his thumb, mate. And a still competitive Demetrius Johnson making good YouTube videos, but he's still active. Now's the time. You want to offer Jon Jones $7 million? It's time to drop $20 million on this fight. 10 and 10, each of them, to show, to fight, to find out who actually is the best fighter in the world right now. These two, I'm serious. I believe that Mighty Mouse is the best fighter of all time. And Alexandre Pantoja is a peaking top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. This is the most legitimate who is the best fighter in the world right now fight. Out of all the bullshit that goes on out there with Jake Paul and Jon Jones against Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou against Renan Ferreira, right now in 2024, Demetrius Johnson versus Alexandre Pantoja is who is the best fighter on the planet right now, skill for skill. Open up the bank, UFC. What else is there to do? Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall? I wonder how that's going to end. Anyway, they are my post-fight thoughts after UFC 310. As you could tell, I could go on about this for bloody days, so I think the content is going to be just exiting my body at a rapid rate this week. So if you want to see all of that, hit that subscribe button if it's your first time here. And if you want to know when we go live to talk about all of this together during the live stream, I go live about 3 times a week. I try and read every single comment during the live stream. So if you want to know when that happens and get engaged on this conversation, hit that bell button so you know when I go live. And if you enjoy the channel and you want to help grow the channel, hit that like button. That helps push this channel out there to more people. The more time I can spend on it, the better for all of us if you're enjoying it. So if you are enjoying it, hit that like button. And all of you guys, you have a very good day, and I'll catch you all in the next video.